So maybe I should tell you a bit about what we did in
Yes.
the gaming industry first,
Sure.
because it was quite progressive in our mind. So we invest in European companies only. Obviously, there are many studios historically in Europe developing games on consoles or on the PC platform as well. But we were quite interested. There are many members of our team actually who are gamers themselves and so on. So we're approached by many studios in the past, but it was still very risky for us to take a bet on a company where you had to put like 30 to 50 million US on a game before the launch, before knowing whether it would be successful or not. So this kind of production risks that we had to take were probably not for us. It's like producing a movie or something. So this is like the traditional gaming industry. But then, so we wanted to be linked to it. So we invested in games that were more around community websites. So we have invested in our portfolio in a website that is called curse.com. It's the largest community website for players of World of Warcraft and any kind of MMO games, actually. So it's about 15 million uniques per month. And that was it until the kind of web browser-based games arrived, like 5 or 6 years ago. Actually, we had many successes in Germany with those games, MMO games that are based on a freemium model. You play for free until there's an extension of games or boosters that you're going to subscribe for. We have invested in a company called eRepublic. Management is based in Spain and marketing as well, but the R&D is based in Romania. So we had also an interest in trying out those offshore development models. And the company is incepted in Ireland as well, so in Dublin. So it's very pan-European. Games on the web are much cheaper to produce. So it's like 1 or 2 million US and you get something interesting. So eRepublic is an MMO strategy game. 90% of the game content is produced by the players themselves, so it's really UGC. But we discovered, like with many other games of this kind on the web in Germany as well, that you end up at the end of the day with a population of hardcore gamers. But it's difficult to get casual gamers stick to it, or even transforming their experience into paying users. So it's very profitable, but it doesn't scale as much as it scales on Facebook, obviously. Then starting 2008 or end of 2007, the first games on Facebook appeared. And then we discovered an amazing business model, something that I have never seen before. I mean, we've been doing venture capital for 15 years, and there was not even something close to the business model you see on Facebook. So today we are obviously on the Facebook landscape of studios today. This is dominated by the US with Zynga, CrowdStar, Six Waves, and so on. Most of the studios are based in the US, and some of them are based in China as well. But there are many studios actually in Europe as well. And it's new teams most of the times, not automatically people who would switch from the traditional model to a Facebook model. But then we are very intensively investing in those studios in Europe, in France, and so on. So we have seeded already one team a year ago. We're doing 2 investments right now with studios, again, Facebook studios. I'm actually negotiating the closing, so I cannot talk about them right now. But those are small-sized games, a few millions of active users per month, compared to, Zynga would probably have close to 300 million players per month. But there's still many ways to do very profitable businesses with this. Yeah.
So can you give us a little bit of information about Facebook gaming economics? Like who's playing, how much are they paying, how much is the investment, what are the returns like? Give us a sense of the opportunity.
Yeah, maybe on what we see on the market, just for, obviously you see Zynga today. Zynga is a company that has like 2,000 employees. It was created 3 years ago. It did in 2010, 850 million US in revenues, and the profit was 400 million. It's a 3 years old company. So this is the leader of the market today. They're actually, in size, they're 6 times the size of the second player in the field in terms of active users per month, and they're like 10 times the size of the number 2 in terms of daily users. So this is really the big leader in the ecosystem. Then you have a collection of about 10 to 15 players who would reach something between 20 and 10 and 50 million players per month. And then you have a collection of players, of studios who actually gather from 1 million players per month and up to 10, something like that. And then you have like maybe 100 of them, 50 or 100 of them. So I gave you the economics of Zynga, like 50% profit on revenues and very large revenue base in just 3 years, and it's still growing on the revenue side. It's a bit actually going down on the audience side. There's a switch from big players to small players in the kind of community players. But the economics, even for a small studio, are absolutely impressive. Last year, a year ago, I spent maybe 6 months trying to convince a studio that it could be nice to welcome us as an investor. And the more we were talking, the more money they were making. And at the end of the day, they just decided to not raise any money because they were making so much every day. This studio was dead 6 months before. They just decided to invest 300,000 euros on the last bet they could do. So they developed a game on Facebook for 300,000 euros. And 6 months after, they were making €500,000 profit per month with just this small investment. So this is the kind of business model you see on Facebook today. Okay. Very small investments. A game would cost €500,000 to €1 million. This was like 3 years ago when you didn't have, 2 years ago, when you didn't have so much marketing budget to put on the table. Today it's a bit different, but it's still very, very profitable. So the business model is really great. How it works is that most people would play for free. Those games are free. You don't have to subscribe. There's no subscription model for this. There's no advertisement model as well. Very, very few games would be based on revenues from banners and things like that. But then you always have a small percentage of people that would be okay to pay for boosters, to pay to extend their user experience. When you give things for free, but not in limited quantity, so I would give you a cigarette for free, and then I tell you it's going to be free again, but you have to wait for a day to get it again. So come back tomorrow. And it's the way to stick people to it. And so this kind of model associated with all the virality features that we see on Facebook is actually what makes it very profitable today. Yeah.
In terms of the profile of the users, what are you seeing?
So there was a big surprise in this industry. First, maybe for the ones who don't really know the numbers on the gaming industry, everybody thinks that only young people play games. It's totally wrong. Even in the traditional gaming industry, 50% of the players worldwide are more than 35 years old. And the ones that actually spend the most are the oldest and not the youngest. On Facebook, it's even worse. The age, the traditional, Facebook obviously is allowed starting 13 years old. So you don't have this kind of very, very young teens playing, but the age is about 40 to 45 years old on average for the one who pay actually those games, for those games. The population is usually female, so it's about 70% of the players on Facebook today are women, and most of them are, the typical profile would be a married woman, 2 kids, at home, not automatically having a job, and spending, and those women would spend at a rate of 75% when they're stick to the. So at certain levels, when you know that the player is not a casual gamer anymore, when he comes back to the games regularly after 1 month, 75% of those people would pay, which is very, very high.
And what kind of numbers are we talking about in terms of paying per person?
It's very, it goes from nothing to, so it's microtransactions. So you have to, you can buy credits, you can buy virtual money on those games and so on. And it could come from 10 cents of a euro or a dollar up to, per month, sometimes people would pay more than $1,000. It's up to you, in fact. The average would be maybe $5 per paying user per month, something like that, which is probably 50% of what you would get on a web-based browser, on a web-based game. On the web, you would get something like 10 US or 20 US for some games. Whether you download the game or whether you play it on the web as a website, it would be between 10 and 20 US for paying users as the revenue you can get, something like that. And the rate of transformation would be probably between 3 to 5% on the web and closer to 1 to 2% on Facebook. But since you have a much larger community of players on Facebook, this 1 to 2% makes it much larger than the web business. Yeah.
Interesting. So, as a game developer, how are social games different than building social games different than building traditional games in terms of production, in terms of promotion?
So first, I'm just an investor, not an executive in those companies.
For the game developers in the audience.
Yeah, but I may say things that are going to be contradicted by the professionals themselves and so on. So with caution from an investor point of view. Okay.
Don't worry, we'll have some of them afterwards,
yeah, sure.
So they can make sure that they'll give their perspective in a minute.
Okay. What we see today is that although Facebook is very obviously well known today within the gaming communities, everybody talks about this platform within studios. It's very, very tricky for traditional studios to actually switch to Facebook. And most of the people who try, whether they originally built mobile games or PC games or console games, when they try to port one of their games on Facebook, usually they fail. It's a matter of generation, probably, I don't know. But there's really like a very sophisticated mechanics to attract people on the game and then to have them stick to the game. And there's a very sophisticated way, not sophisticated, but it's very typical to Facebook. The way you would monetize on Facebook is very different from the way you would monetize on the web or even with a subscription model or with virtual goods models. Zynga was originally not a gaming studio. It was a company that was providing statistical, so a data mining platform for online games. So they actually understood very quickly what was the mechanics between virality, retention, and monetization. And when they switched to those games, they said, well, we're going to try ourselves because we understand really what's beneath. When they switched to becoming a studio, they applied what they had learned in terms of statistics and so on. So the way you actually build up a game today on Facebook is very close to taking a bit of the artistic content, to production content and so on from the traditional gaming game design, but also associating it to it all of the data you can get from the population, all of this very precise model of rate of transformations, rate of monetization and so on that you apply to it. Because when you design a game for the PC platform, you actually take a production risk. You don't know whether the game is going to work or not before you launch it. It's the same with Facebook, but it just costs $500,000 to launch something. And then on Facebook, you get real-time data today, real-time data. So you know every minute what's going to be your rate of monetization, transformation, and what level of people and so on. So you can make terabytes of data mining that gives you the insight of where you should go and so on. And most games so end up with being quite similar for one another. It's not as creative today on Facebook as it is on the PC platforms or on the consoles, but it's going to evolve, right? I mean, it's been only 2 years or 3 years. That's very young. Yeah.
Well, that takes me to then my last question perfectly, which is, so what do you see as next on these platforms? What do you see as next in terms of social gaming?
Yeah, so Zynga is leading the pack. There's a second wave of people. I mean, there were many acquisitions, obviously. So Electronic Arts acquired Playfish. Then you had Disney who acquired Playdom as well. So the 3 top players are actually leading the pack. Zynga is still independent. And then the rest of them are waiting to get acquired one day, I guess. For the small studios, the wave, the switch, the moves that they make today is they all try to build up a collection of games because there's a lot of cross-selling as well. When you attract a player to one game, it would be very easy actually to transfer him to another game of yours. Very, very cheap and very easy to do, and it works very well. So they all try to set up portfolios of games, but not the US way. If you're based in Middle East, or if you're based in Europe, or if you're based in Asia, what you would probably do is trying to localize your content. So it doesn't mean automatically translating the game itself, although translating a game in the local language is very profitable for many studios. I see games in French or in German that were just coming out of nowhere, that were massively successful just because they were in French and German for those local communities. And then those games are trying to adapt content as well. A game on pyramids, for instance, would work very well in one geography, but for another geography you would have to transfer pyramids to, I don't know, the conquistadores if you talk to the South American people and so on. So culturally adapting the content is also a big move today within those small studios. Zynga, the big ones, and all studios are talking today about switching to the mobile platforms. This is the next wave, probably. It comes from the fact that some games actually using virtual goods models that have been ported on the iPad, for instance, were extraordinarily profitable right away. And in fact, the FCC, the communication authorities, administration in the US, actually is going to force Apple to reduce how easy it is to pay on the iPad, because those games were so addictive for young players that they were ending up with $300, $400 bills at the end of the day, at the end of the month, or something like that. So you just click one time with your digit, and then you bought 10 euro packages and so on. So it's much easier actually to interact with a game on an iPad. It's all touchscreen and so on. And people discovered that this touchscreen interface is very, very dynamic with games. And some people actually predict today that the console, part of the console game business is going to switch very, very quickly to tablets today, to iPads and all those equivalent products and so on. So one big move is on the mobile industry. The problem is that if you deploy a game on Facebook, it's just about Flash most of the time, whereas Flash doesn't work on the iPad and the iPhone. So most of the time, those studios would have to whether redevelop everything from scratch, or if you thought of it in advance, to just develop their games originally in a language that is portable to mobile platforms. Because obviously porting to mobile is much more complex than just developing for the web. And HTML5 could be a way, for instance, but then for now, Apple is just putting constraints on it and so on. So yeah. Okay. So the big move is on mobile, yeah. Excellent. And that's specific knowledge. The next thing is also that it's quite difficult to hire in this industry. So the pace is actually slower, probably because of the difficulty to find talent. So if you can train people very early on those platforms, and very quickly specialize in hiring the ones that are on the market today, it's like a race for most studios today in Europe and in Asia as well. Yeah.
Excellent. Very interesting. I'm very curious to see what our panelists have to say in terms of what's going on regionally. Is this similar to what's going on in Europe also as well? Thank you very much, Guillaume.
Thank you. Okay.
Let me just switch these.